Ever since I started recreating the Five Nights at Freddy's games in Minecraft, one of the most requested games I've been asked to make is the Joy of Creation story mode. The game was released back in the summer of 2017, and it's easy to see why it's become one of, if not the most iconic and popular fan games of all time. Not only does it have 5 completely unique levels, each with different locations and mechanics for each one, but it was also one of the first games to introduce free roam into a FNAF game. Now, while I have played this game for myself and loved every part of it, currently there are too many other FNAF projects that I'm currently working on, and I want to focus on finishing those before starting on another massive project like this. However, with the release of the Office demo for the Joy of Creations remake, this is the perfect time to recreate working gameplay without spending multiple months building the full game. That, and I'm willing to put all of my other projects on hold for the time being while I work on this, as I found the demo so incredibly fun to play through, and I really wanted to see how I could make it work in Minecraft. The game takes the concept of the original Office gameplay, but turns it into an even better and scarier game, while also introducing more in-depth mechanics. This would also be one of the first few times that I've recreated a free roam FNAF game, so I'm even more excited to get started. So without any more further ado, let's go ahead and see how I can make this work in Minecraft. Before getting started on any of the gameplay, the first thing to do is to build the play area itself. Now, since this is just a demo of the full game, only the office and the surrounding areas are included instead of having the entire house connected to it. Like always though, I add as much smaller details into my build as possible, like with these custom player heads. However, these aren't just only for decoration, as some of them are going to have real purposes during the gameplay. I've also once again used a map art technique, where by filling a map with a block built pattern and putting it onto an item frame, I'm able to recreate the texture of the outside of the house, while still having the walls be 1 block wide. I've been against using map art as a primary building block like this before, but with the addition of the exterior with the fences and some trees, it really helped to bring this build together a whole lot more. And now with the build fully finished, you can now see how everything looks like all together with all of the features and details added. Now you might be wondering how all of the interactable objects are going to work in such a small area like this, however I already have a few ideas in mind that I'm really looking forward to messing around with. So as the first gameplay mechanic, let's go ahead and add in all of the office gameplay, so that way I'm able to properly defend myself. So since I've already brought up the interactable objects, that's what I'm going to be working on first. Now because these are block built cabinets that I can't do anything with normally, what I want to have happen is have the block replaced with a different one like a staircase, which is then going to make it look like I've opened up the door. And the prompt to make this work is something I've used many times in the past, and that's to crouch in a certain area and then have a command block send an output. So this command block here is checking to see if I'm standing within a certain radius of these coordinates, which is positioned 1 block right in front of the cabinet. So if I'm standing within that certain area, it's then going to let the second command power, which is looking to see if I'm crouching or not. So if both commands power at the same time, this command block is then going to send an output, which is then going to power this set block command and replace the top block in the cabinet with a spruce staircase. So as you can see, when I step on top of this block right here and then crouch, the block is then going to get replaced, so that way it looks like the door opened up and I can now look inside of the cabinet. Now if I stop crouching, another command block is going to set the original block back in its place, that way the door is closed and I can no longer look inside of it. Now since this feature is pretty important and is going to have more gameplay attached to it later, I don't want to be able to move around while the door is open. So this command block here is going to force me to teleport to my current position, that way I'm not able to move until I stop crouching. What this does is forces me to look at the cabinet, that way I'm not able to interact with other prompts around me and keeps my focus on the current object. However, leaving it is no big deal, as I can just stop crouching and then I'm able to look around and move around again like normal. So all I need to do now is the exact same thing for every other cabinet, that way I can start adding gameplay into them by hiding the fuses and cupcakes inside each one. And now that I've done the same for all of them, I want to go ahead and quickly show off the second type of cupboard, as instead of counting as a single object, each block works in its own separate way. So when I want to search through them, I have to check each block individually instead of the whole thing opening up at once. Now the reason why I'm doing this is to increase the amount of objects I have to search through, as normally there's supposed to be 3 drawers in each cabinet, but with the way Minecraft blocks work, this is the most I'm going to be able to get. With that being said though, I still think it works out really well, while also adding even more hiding places to look through. Next, I might as well add in the fuses themselves that appear randomly in one of the cabinets. Now since I want the item to be visible but not just have it dropped in between the staircase and the block below it, I've placed an armor stand inside of each one, which is going to hold the item in its hand. So not only can the item actually be visible while hiding inside of the block, but there's also an easy way to set up a randomizer to select which one is going to be hiding the fuse. Now it might look like there's a lot of command blocks here, but it's nowhere as bad as you might think it is. The randomizer itself is actually entirely inside of this single command block right here, however it does involve the scoreboard called cabinet random to work. Now the main part of the command block is in this last part right here, where it's running a random command to roll a number between 1 and 8. Now when it does that, it's going to store the result of it in the scoreboard cabinet random. So when I power this command block, the score is going to change to a random number between 1 and 8. Now the reason why I've chosen those numbers is because there are 8 total cabinets in the office to interact with, so the randomizer is deciding which one is going to hide the fuse. Now that's where this row of repeating command blocks comes in, as when the score matches a certain number, it's going to replace the hand item of the corresponding armor stand with an iron nugget. Now the same thing goes for each of the other armor stands, however only one of them is going to be given the item at a time, since the randomizer is only going to power once. Speaking of which, the way the randomizer itself powers is when this command block detects that none of the armor stands with the named cabinet are currently holding an iron nugget in their hand. So all of the armor stands have the same name, that way once the item has been removed, this command block is going to detect it, but each armor stand has a different tag, so that way these command blocks know the difference between each one and can give the right armor stand the item. So to finish this up, I've now gone ahead and turned on the system and made every armor stand invisible, and now I can properly go through each cabinet to try and find the fuse. And just like in game, once I do find it and collect it, it's then going to instantly hide a second one in a different cabinet somewhere else. Now since I'm not able to look at the item and pick it up for myself, the item is going to get removed from the armor stand and then put into my offhand if I open up the cabinet with the fuse inside of it. And like I mentioned, now that I have it, another one has spawned in, however even if I do find it, I won't be able to pick it up until I use this fuse first. With that aside, I now want to go ahead and take a look at the doors and the curtain, as I need them to be able to work before I'm able to add the flashlight to look through them. Now because I'm using normal Minecraft doors that can be used at any time from any distance, I've placed a few armor stands in front of each one, which stops me from being able to reach through them unless I'm within a certain range away from it. Now this works because armor stands are entities and have hitboxes just like any other mob, meaning I'm not able to reach through them and open up the door. So starting with the closet, these are the coordinates I need to be standing within for me to be able to open up the door. So if I'm standing within 0.3 blocks away from that position, both of those armor stands are going to be teleported underneath the map, which is then going to let me open up the door since the hitboxes are no longer blocking it. So once the command block detects it and I open up the door, a quick animation is going to play which just makes opening the door feel a bit more realistic. Now this just uses some teleport commands to make me face in certain directions, however once it's finished, a second teleport command is going to hold me in place inside the door frame. So I'm not actually able to enter the closet and I can only look from side to side, however I'm just far enough into the frame where I can still see the entire room. However, since I'm still able to look around freely, I can click on the door again to close it up like normal, and then a second animation is going to play as the door closes before I'm then taken back inside the office. And the same thing works for the entrance door as well, where the only difference is the animation that plays since there are 2 doors instead of just the one. Then to leave, I just need to close one of the doors again, and then I walk back inside the office and both doors have now closed back up. Then finally is the curtain next to the desk, which I've changed a little bit by hiding a door inside of it so that way I'm able to interact with it. Now this banner's hitbox doesn't actually cover up the door itself, so once I walk up to it and open it up, the curtain is going to open with it and then I'm moved inside the wall a little bit. Now this is the main reason why I made the walls out of map art, is if the walls were 2 blocks wide, I would have to have moved even further forward just to be able to see outside the window. However, to then leave, I just need to close the door again and the curtain is going to close, and now I'm able to move around again. However, this isn't what the final thing is going to look like, as what I've now done is placed black concrete behind each door, which stops me from being able to see what's past it. So this is where I can use a flashlight to remove these blocks while also adding a small amount of light to the area. Now the flashlight itself is just a netherite ingot named flashlight with some instructions on how to use it. So like it says, I need to crouch to turn it on, so I've set up another crouch detection scoreboard for this system, and these command blocks are going to send an output when I do that. However, I'm not just able to turn it on whenever I want, as I can only be standing within the doorways to turn the flashlight on. So when I'm standing within those set of coordinates and I'm holding the item in my hand, these command blocks are then going to send an output to remove the black concrete from in front of the door. Then for whenever I stop using the flashlight, this second repeating command block is going to put the concrete back if I stop crouching or if I'm no longer standing within the doorway itself. So now with some proper lighting setup and everything all together, this should hopefully give you an idea of what the final gameplay is going to look like. So now if I go ahead and open up one of the doors, I'm not able to see anything past it, which honestly makes it a lot more ominous before turning on the light and seeing if there's anything there or not. And since I'm crouching while the light is turned on, this is also going to make the animatronics seem a lot taller than I am, which I think is going to make this even better. Before that though, there's still 2 more mechanics that need to be added first, so let's next go ahead and take a look at the monitors, so that way I can view the camera system around the building. For every camera system I've ever made, I've always had some sort of item in the inventory which is going to teleport me to a camera when I throw it. However, this time I want to make a camera system that doesn't involve any items at all. So what's going to happen once I get within a certain distance from the desk is 3 baby zombies are going to appear, which are each going to act as the prompts for each of the different cameras. And what I mean by that is when I hit the zombie, this command block is going to detect that the mob took damage and is then going to send an output. Now what it's then going to do is teleport the zombie back underneath the desk, that way I'm not able to hit it again, before then powering this next chain of command blocks here. So first the scoreboard is going to be set to 1, and this score is going to let all of the future command blocks know that I'm currently using the cameras. Then I'm going to be given a slowness effect so that way it looks like I'm zoomed into the monitor, before a redstone block gets set over here, which is then going to activate the teleport command itself. And the same thing works for the other 2 monitors as well, so let's go ahead and show off how this all works. Now I've also gone ahead and made each of the zombies invisible, as I obviously don't want them to be seen during the gameplay. However, even if I punch the monitor, the zombie still takes damage and I've now been teleported to that camera position. So while I'm here, I'm able to look around the entire room like normal, but I'm not able to open up the door behind me since those armor stands are still blocking the way. Then if I want to leave the camera, all I have to do is crouch, and I've now been teleported back in front of the monitors again, and now I can select a different camera. Now something you're going to notice is that I'm still able to move around like normal, which is usually something I would stop me from being able to do, so that way I don't just wander off somewhere. However, this is actually completely intentional and is going to be the way I'm able to switch between the different cameras without having to go back to the office every time. Like I mentioned, I want to make this camera system work without using any items whatsoever, and this system right here lets me do that. So what happens when I move left or right while looking in a camera is one of these 2 command blocks is going to detect it, and is then going to teleport me to the next camera if I go to the right, or the previous one if I move to the left. Now this just uses the execute command positioned at set coordinates. However, once I get within a certain distance away from them, the command block is then going to send an output. However, since I'm still able to move forwards and backwards, I need something to prevent me from going anywhere else. So this next system here does something very similar, where instead of looking to see if I move from side to side, it's going to send an output if I go forwards or backwards. Now instead of teleporting me to a new camera position though, what it's going to do instead is teleport me back to the original coordinates for the camera that I'm already looking at. So as you can see, when I move to the right while looking at camera 1, I'm then going to be teleported to camera 2, and when I move back to the left, I'm now looking back at camera 1 again. So just like in the demo, I'm able to switch between the different cameras by using the A and D keys on the keyboard. And if I try to move anywhere else, the system is just going to teleport me back to where I should be. And that is now the camera system completely finished, which adds yet another design that I've come up with while making these FNAF maps. Now to add in some final polish to it, what I've gone ahead and done is added in some sound effects to play while I'm looking at the cameras, as well as for whenever I switch to a different one. Now as a more important feature, once I leave the cameras, I'm then going to be given back any items I had in my inventory like the flashlight or a fuse if I had one already. And speaking of fuses, now that all of the other player mechanics have been fully added, I can now finally start working on the fuse box itself, which might just be the most important feature in the entire game. Now since the fuse box has a lot of different features to it, I had to mess around with a few different designs first before coming up with something that I think works well for this recreation. So what I've done to start is put another baby zombie in front of the fuse box inside the build, and hitting it is then going to send me to a block built version of the box where all of the labels and prompts are clear and easy to see. Now we'll take a look at how to change the fuses themselves later, as I first need to wait for the systems to actually fail first. So as you can see with this sidebar, there is a timer scoreboard for the main power, the 3 cameras and the flashlight. Now starting with the cameras, these can either get disabled if Bonnie punches it or if I use them for too long. So I have the score for them set to 1400 ticks, as it takes 70 seconds for them to eventually break on their own. And since there are 20 Minecraft ticks in one real life second, if I multiply 20 by 70, that gives me the 1400 tick total. So what's going to happen if I'm looking at a certain camera is the scoreboard for that camera is going to start decreasing. Now once it reaches 0 or any number beneath it, the scoreboard camera crouch is then going to be set to 1 to automatically kick me off the camera. Now the same thing happens for the other 2 cameras, however if this does happen, it's going to end up breaking the A and D system since one of those cameras has now been disabled. So to fix this, I've copied the commands over from the original setup but changed the order of the command blocks to work around the broken camera. So for example, the command block that used to take me from camera 3 to camera 2 is now going to take me from camera 3 to camera 1 and skips over camera 2. Now this command block is only going to power if the scoreboard for the camera 2 timer matches a number below 0, that way it's not active at the same time that the main system works and ends up breaking the system. Now if 2 cameras were to get disabled at the same time, it's then going to activate this next setup here, which is going to power no matter if I walk left or right and make sure that I get teleported back to the camera that I'm already looking at. As an example, I've turned off camera 1 and now when I cycle between them all, I'm only able to go between cameras 2 and 3 no matter which way I go. Now if I go ahead and disable camera 3 as well, you're going to notice that I'm only able to teleport to camera 2 now and I'm not able to look at any other camera. So with that now out the way, I can now move on to the fuse box side of things to not only replace the fuse, but to also see how much percentage is left before it's actually going to run out. So each of these meters are going to start out just like this, where they have 5 bars and are colored in green, however that's going to change the more I use the item. So for the cameras, once the scoreboard drops to a certain number, it's then going to change the name of the armor stand to have 1 less bar, and is then going to change the theme of it so that way it can change the color of the text. I've sped up the timer to show off what this is going to look like, where you can see that not only is the meter going down, but the color is also changing from green to yellow, then to red, before it finally runs out and the meter is completely drained. So this is where I can finally go ahead and change out the fuse itself to reset the meter and to power the camera back up again. Now for the prompt itself, I've once again used baby zombies, as I think they're a nice and simple way to make interactable objects like this. So if I have a fuse collected and I hit one of those baby zombies, it's then going to remove the fuse from my offhand, and then it's going to remove the chain from the build, that way it actually looks like I took the fuse out of the fuse box. Then a redstone block is going to power the rest of the system here, where a play sound command is going to play, before the chain gets then put back in place, and the score is going to be set back to 1400 again. And here's what the system looks like now that it's all been fully added, where now I can go ahead and change out any of the fuses as long as I have a fuse item on me. Now there are a few extra added command blocks like for this new scoreboard right here, however this is just to make sure that while a fuse is being replaced, I won't be able to leave the fuse box and get teleported back up to the normal version of the build. On the topic of that, leaving the fuse box once again uses another crouch detector, so I just have to crouch to be teleported back up to the power room. Now depending if I actually use a fuse or not is going to determine if I get it back, that way I don't lose it if I open up the fuse box without actually doing anything. But to show this off one more time, I'll set the camera back to 0, and now you can see that when I click over the fuse itself, it's going to remove it before the meter then gets set back to full, and now I'm able to use camera 3 again. Now all of this was just for the cameras, as the same thing needs to happen for the flashlight and the main power. Now the flashlight is a lot easier, as all I had to do is add this single command block here, which is going to remove 1 from the scoreboard every time I use it. Then after 7 uses, the battery is going to run out, and the system itself is no longer going to work since the score for it is below 1. Now at the same time, this second system here is going to turn on, which simply just has a play sound command play to indicate that the light no longer works. This finally leaves the main power as the final fuse to give function to. Now this works a little differently than the others, as the scoreboard is always going to be counting down while the game is active. Now just like everything else, I can replace the fuse at any time to reset the countdown. However, once the scoreboard gets low enough is when the main part of the system is going to power. In total, it takes 3 minutes and 20 seconds for the power to fully run out, which is exactly 4,000 Minecraft ticks. However, before that happens, the lights are going to start to flicker 50 seconds before the power runs out, which is every 2 minutes and 30 seconds, or 3,000 Minecraft ticks. So once the main timer gets beneath 1000 ticks, the redstone blocks over these hoppers are going to get removed, which lets an item cycle around them to power these 4 command block chains. Now the first 4 command blocks in each one are to remove the light blocks from inside the build by setting them to air, but they're then going to be re-added shortly after again to recreate the flickering effect. The rest of these command blocks are just for sound effects, so that way it's easier to tell what's going on. Then once the score reaches 0, this chain of command blocks here is going to cut off every single system by either teleporting the zombie prompts outside the build or by blocking the doors again by using the armor stands. Now this is also when the Freddy power out sequence is going to start, as I'm not able to replace the main fuse once the power goes out, meaning Freddy is eventually going to enter the room and I'm going to get jump scared. So to show off everything altogether, once enough time has passed during the night, the lights are going to start to flicker, and there's also some added sound effects and ambience in the background to indicate that this is happening. Now during this time, I still have enough time to find another fuse and replace it. However, after a short amount of time passes, the power is going to completely cut out and everything is going to go dark. And as you can see, I'm not able to use any of the other resources in the office once the power goes out, as at this point it is practically game over and the only thing I can do is wait for the jump scare. So with that being said, now that I've finished adding in all of the player mechanics, it's finally time to add in the core part of the game itself by adding in the animatronics themselves. Getting started, the first thing I've done is made each of the animatronic models by using a mix of different armor stands. Now while I've done this many times by now, animating these models is going to be a lot different compared to my other maps, as the ignited animatronics aren't just still images on a camera. Instead, these models are going to have lots of different movement paths and animations around the office, which is going to make them feel like living things instead of just a lifeless robot. It makes the most sense to start with Freddy, as he's the first character we encounter during the gameplay. Now he's made up of 7 different armor stands, meaning for every position he goes to, I need 7 different command blocks to teleport each armor stand and have it in a way where it's not disconnected from the base armor stand. So the way models work in pretty much every game is it's a single object with a bone structure to move each limb. However, I have to do this individually in Minecraft since each armor stand is a separate entity. On top of that, I also need to pose each armor stand so that way Freddy isn't just standing up straight every time I see him in one of the cameras. And Freddy has a lot of different positions, as not only can he just appear to the left and right of each room, but when I go up to the door or the window that he's at, Freddy changes position to be closer to the doorway, which doubles the amount of positions that I needed to set up. This is a very time-consuming process, however it is the most important thing needed for any of this to work. With that being said though, now that the teleport commands have been set up, I've now connected them all to a system that's going to let Freddy move to each one on his own. Now it looks like a lot is going on here, but these chain of command blocks are the exact same teleport commands done down here. The main system itself starts inside of this command block, which is running a random command and is going to roll a number between 1 and 5 and stores the result of it in the iFreddy chant scoreboard. This is then going to power one of these 5 command blocks right here, as instead of making Freddy move to an area on a set timer, there's a chance that Freddy is going to appear between 30 and 50 seconds, with there being 3 5-second increments in between. Now once the scoreboard has been set to that number, the iFreddy timer is going to start counting down, which is then going to lead up to when Freddy actually shows up in one of the cameras. Now since I want that to be randomized as well, there's another randomizer rolling for each of the 6 different positions, which is finally going to be detected by one of these 6 command blocks and teleports the Freddy model to those set of coordinates. So when the game just starts, Freddy isn't going to be active, but his timer is going to instantly start counting down. And now that it's reached 0, I can now go through each of the cameras to find him, where you can see he's going to be standing in one of the corners just like that. Now just for the sake of it, I'll go ahead and use the exact same randomizer command again, where you can see Freddy is no longer standing at that position and has now moved to a different camera. All of this works by using this command system right here. However, I also have this second setup which is for Freddy's other positions for when he's standing closer to the doorway. Now that system is only going to power and move Freddy closer if I'm standing at the same entryway that Freddy is already at. So Freddy is currently hiding inside of this camera right here, so let's go ahead and walk up to the door and shine the light on him, and now you can see that Freddy is still at the same side, but is a lot closer to the doorway where I'm standing at. However, I now only want this to happen if I'm looking at the same side as Freddy. I say he's over to the left side and I shine the light over to the right. Freddy then needs to disappear and move on to somewhere else. So to get a detection system started, I've placed an armor stand behind of each door with one on the left and one on the right. And what I've done is set up an execute command to send an output when I look at each one. So by putting that exact same command into the proper system, Freddy is now only going to move closer to the doorway if I'm looking at the armor stand at the same side as Freddy. If I'm not, then one of these command blocks is going to send an output depending what entrance I'm at, which is then going to set the score I Freddy leave to 1. Now what this does is tells the Freddy armor stands to teleport outside of the build, and it's then going to re-roll the chance randomizer again, which is then going to start Freddy's entire system all over again from the very beginning. Right now we can see that Freddy is currently standing at the left side of the window, so what I'm going to do is shine the light the opposite way, where you'll notice that Freddy obviously isn't going to appear and has now been completely removed from the build even if I go back to look at the side where he was. Now to make this easier to tell, I've also added in a play sound command to play, which just lets me know that I missed Freddy and he's now moved on to somewhere else. So now that Freddy can appear and go away, the next thing to do is to add in the sequence that happens if I shine the light in the right direction. Now this is going back to what I was talking about earlier with animating these armor stands, as a lot needs to be done to not only change each armor stand's position, but also keep everything connected to the main body. And the system for that is going to look something like this. Now this is just the first half of the sequence, but I've already used all of the types of command blocks needed for the rest of the system, so go over this now and then show off the full thing afterward. So for this example, Freddy is currently standing at the right side of the window, and what I want him to do is start out by reaching towards me before then quickly turning around and blocking his eyes from the light. Now the first part is pretty simple, as all I need to do is use the data merge command to change the rotation values of each armor stand limb, but to do it in an order where it looks like it's actually moving in one motion. The system starts with those set values, and those values are going to slightly change in the next command block every time the animation moves to the next frame. Next is getting the armor stand itself to rotate so that way it's facing away from the window. Now this took a little longer to set up, but not for the reasons that you might think, as getting the armor stand itself to rotate can be done by using a single command. The base armor stand is teleporting to its current set of coordinates, but these last two values here are what actually makes it rotate to face somewhere else. I've then made this a repeating command block so that way it's constantly going to update and makes the turn look a lot smoother. Now those commands are only going to be powered for a short amount of time, but this is just to show you how a rotating armor stand works and what it's going to look like. That's just the easy part, as then what I needed to do was link the rest of Freddy's limbs to the same body as it's spinning around. So this starts by once again teleporting the armor stand to a set position, but this time I need the limb to be teleported relative to the base armor stand. Now this isn't new, as it's what I use for when an animatronic model teleports to a new position, but the difference here is that since the base armor stand is no longer facing a set direction, the position relative to the armor stand is going to change while also rotating at the same time. So with all of this working together now, this is what everything looks like all together, which is just a nice but quick animation of Freddy attacking and then looking away. Now I'll show it off one more time, so I'll go ahead and reset Freddy's position and then set the redstone block down again, where you can see he once again goes through his attack animation before then looking away from the flashlight. But now here is what the system looks like now that every frame has been fully added. So after rotating to face away from me, the second half of the system has Freddy looking back towards me while screaming before he then leaves the area. Now I won't go over all of it as it's the exact same commands than before, however once Freddy leaves, a few more scoreboards need to be updated so that way the game goes on afterward. First is a scoreboard called Freddy Caught 2, which is just going to keep track of how many times I've caught Freddy and will eventually be how to beat the game if that score reaches 12. Now right now that score is at 219, as I've done a lot of testing to make sure this all works the way it should. Then all of the black concrete is going to get set back in front of the entrances again, that way Freddy is able to leave, and then the entire sequence is going to start over again, where Freddy is later once again going to reappear at one of the cameras. Now there's also this small setup here, which is just to help out with the animation side of things, as since Freddy's armor stands teleport relative to Freddy's position, those coordinates are going to change depending which way Freddy is looking at. So when Freddy turns back to look towards me, these command blocks are going to make sure that all of the other armor stands are in the right position around the base Freddy model. Without this, Freddy's arms would no longer be attached to him, which is obviously something I don't want to happen. But now let's finally go ahead and take a look at the entire sequence all together. So right now we can see that Freddy is currently standing at that left corner, so if I go ahead and use the light on him, you can see that now the entire animation is going to play out. And as you heard, Freddy also has some sound effects added to him, but also his eyes are going to glow red when he faces back towards me again. And the way I've done this is by simply using the item replace command to swap out the item on Freddy's head with a different item from inside of a chest. So it's a very quick and simple addition to add, however it makes the entire sequence look even better. And this is the same technique that I've used to get the clock in the office to update when I shine the light on Freddy. So you might have noticed that the Freddy Court scoreboard increased when I did that, and these command blocks are going to detect it and move the time forward on the clock. So inside of this chest here are 12 different player heads, and each one is going to replace the one in the office when these command blocks see that the scoreboard matches the same number. When the game starts, the clock is going to be set to 12 by default, and every time I catch Freddy at one of the entrances, the next player head on the armor stand is going to replace it, along with a bell chime to go along with it. Now if I go ahead and update the scoreboard myself, you can see the differences between each one, and this is just going to cycle around until it does a full rotation back to 12. And that is now everything to do with Ignited Freddy's main gameplay sequence, which now has just under 400 command blocks to make everything work. However, I'm not done with Freddy just yet, as the final thing left to add is of course the jump scare, which also needs the power out sequence to go along with it. So starting with that, this is all going to be connected to the main fuse box timer that I set up earlier on in this video. So once the power goes out and all of the systems go offline, the next thing that's going to happen is the Toreador March is going to start playing just like how it does in FNAF 1. Now quickly taking a look at my FNAF 1 map, I did actually recreate a small part of the song by using note blocks, however I want to make this a lot more accurate to the original game. Now not only that, but this new system is going to be a lot more efficient since I'm going to be using command blocks instead of note blocks, as I can use the play sound command to recreate a note block sound and have it executed at a certain set of coordinates. Now this does involve some more work since the pitch needs to match the note block, but this is already a better design than having a note block platform right on top of the build. So each command block here represents what would be a note block, and the finished song sounds a bit like this. Now after a while you'll notice that I start to use 3 command blocks instead of just 2, and that's because these don't actually play a note, but are instead a randomizer that's going to determine whether Freddy is going to jump scare me or not. So instead of attacking me once the song ends, there is a 1 in 25 chance that Freddy is going to attack me during the second half of the song. And once the score does hit 25, the song itself is going to stop playing since there's another execute command inside of each command block, which is only going to let the play sound power if the scoreboard power out music matches 1, which means Freddy hasn't jump scared me yet. Now if the score is set to 0, it means Freddy has jumped out, which is when the jump scare itself is actually going to happen. Instead of instantly attacking me though, Freddy is first going to enter the room before chasing after me. Now depending which side of the room I'm standing at is going to change which side Freddy is going to come from. So say if I'm standing closer to this side of the room around the desk, Freddy is going to jump through the window. So Freddy's armor stands are going to start behind the glass just like this, and are all going to teleport through the wall to end up inside the room. Now since an armor stand on its own isn't going to go after me, I need to put the armor over a zombie which is then going to start chasing me. So if I'm standing within 3 blocks away from the desk, a zombie with the tag iFreddyZ is going to spawn at the same place where the model teleports inside the room. Then instead of having the armor stands teleport relative to the main Freddy body, they're going to start teleporting around the zombie instead, that way it looks like Freddy is actually moving towards me. To see what this looks like, I'll go ahead and spawn in Freddy for myself, where you can see he jumps through the window and then starts to chase me since the zombie now has control over Freddy. However, if I'm standing on the other side of the room, Freddy's going to enter through these double doors instead. So one more time, I'll go ahead and spawn in Freddy, where you can see the doors open up and then he starts chasing after me again. Now of course what's going to happen once he does catch me is the jump scare is going to play out, so let's go ahead and add in that final feature to fully complete Freddy. Now just like with the flashlight sequence at the entrances, this once again involves a lot of different command blocks to move Freddy around and recreate the jump scare. Now all of this works in the exact same way as the other animations do, only that this time I'm also going to be teleported around with it since Freddy picks up the player and throws them to the floor. Other than that, the important part of the system is in this command block chain right here, which is going to reset every scoreboard in Animatronics system after the jump scare is finished. That way the entire thing resets and I'm able to play the game again. But the best way to see this is by actually showing it off. So like we saw, Freddy's going to start chasing after me, but then once he catches me, he's going to pick me up before then dropping me to the floor, where now we can see Freddy standing over me before the screen then goes dark. This is probably the most involved jump scare that I've ever made, however I really like how it turned out and it might be my favorite one that I've made yet. So let's go ahead and see it one more time, but this time from the opposite side of the room, where you can once again see that I get teleported up to face Freddy, before then getting thrown down to the ground again. Now you might have also noticed that I once again used a different player head for Freddy during this sequence, as it's actually inner Freddy who attacks and not ignited Freddy. So this player head uses a mix of the original one but with a jawbone at the bottom, that way it looks more like the thing that we see at the end of the game. And though the jump scare itself turned out really well, I want to bring up the fact that I also added in another set of armor stands just for this sequence to act as the player's arms. So during the jump scare, these two armor stands are going to teleport relative to my coordinates, and are also going to have their own set of animations, so that way it looks like I'm trying to stop Freddy from getting me. Now this is only the second time that I've ever done this, however it's still a really great and fun addition that I'll probably add to the other jump scares as well, even if it's not going to be seen for very long. And that is now the first animatronic fully added now that all of Freddy's mechanics have been all completed. Now it actually took longer than normal to do all of this, but it does make sense with how much there is to do here compared to a normal FNAF game. With that being said though, let's not waste any more time and move on to the second animatronic we encounter, with that being Ignited Bonnie. Now just like with Freddy, I've once again started by setting up all of Bonnie's camera positions and connecting it to a randomized timer. This time though, there are double of the amount of timers as Freddy, as Bonnie can appear during a much longer time frame starting at 2.5 minutes, and can go all the way up to 4 minutes. Another thing is that both Bonnie and Freddy can be in the same camera at the same time, but they can't be in the same corner since they would be standing on top of each other. So when Bonnie's timer ends and the system chooses a position for him to go to, he won't be able to teleport to the same corner if Freddy is already standing at the same place. Now I've also gone ahead and done the exact same thing for Freddy, so that way the same thing doesn't happen the other way around, where Freddy isn't able to go to a corner if Bonnie is already standing there. So when the gameplay starts, Bonnie's timer is also going to instantly start counting down, where there's enough time for Freddy to appear around 2 or 3 times before Bonnie does. However, when the first timer does end, Bonnie is then going to appear in a random corner, where a second timer has now also started counting down. Now this one just makes sure that Bonnie is eventually going to leave even if I ignore him, as his main mechanic of breaking the camera is only going to start if I look directly at him. This works in the exact same way as before, where I've placed 2 armor stands in each hallway, which is going to send an output when I look at their general direction. The difference this time though is that it's only going to send an output when I'm looking at them through the cameras, instead of actually being in the hallway itself like I did with Freddy. So as you can see, when I'm on the same camera as Bonnie, nothing is going to happen until I look at Bonnie himself, which is when the command block sends an output. Now if I try this while looking through the doorway itself, that system is no longer going to power, and instead Bonnie is just going to be standing directly in front of me, about to punch me in the face. Now the animation for that is going to be the exact same one as for when he breaks the camera, which is what I've gone ahead and set up first. So if I'm looking at the camera 1 armor stand on the left hand side and Bonnie is standing at the same connected position, this command block is then going to send an output, which then powers the animation cycle for when Bonnie is going to punch the camera. And this was something I was actually really looking forward to finally making, as not only is it one of the most iconic parts of the entire game, but the idea of an animatronic punching the player is just really fun, especially when a game like this tries to take itself seriously. So to see what this looks like, Bonnie is currently standing at the left corner of camera 1, and if I look at him, he grabs control over my view, and then quickly sideswipes the camera, which is then going to disable it. So one more time, Bonnie is going to scream in my face before punching the camera, where now I need to use a fuse to fix the camera so that way I'm able to use it again. However, Bonnie doesn't leave just yet, as even after he does break the camera, his leave timer is still going to count down, meaning if I go back up to the door where he broke the camera, there's a high chance he's still going to be there and punch me in the face as well. And the same thing goes for the other 5 camera animations as well, where the camera locks onto Bonnie before he breaks it. Now each of these systems also end in the exact same way, where the camera crouch scoreboard gets set to 1 so that way I'm forced kicked from the camera, and then the fuse timer for that camera also gets set to 0, meaning I'll have to replace its fuse to be able to use that camera again. And even if I leave or switch to a different camera during the sequence, it's still going to get disabled as the rest of the system is still going to power throughout. But now moving on to the more exciting part, this final system here is what gets Bonnie to punch me physically if I use the light while he's standing at the entranceway. Now you'll notice that this all looks very similar compared to the previous setup, and that's because like I mentioned, they both use the exact same animation, but there are a few differences between the two since both have different events that happen afterward. So instead of starting with 6 starting command blocks, this time there's only 3, as Bonnie is going to attack from the center of the doorway instead of from each corner like Freddy does. So this combines the same system from before, where it checks to see if Bonnie is standing within a certain set of positions, and is then going to check to see if I've used the flashlight or not. Now these extra command blocks up here are just because Bonnie has a bit more variation in his camera positions, as instead of just standing up straight, he'll sometimes be hanging from the ceiling. So some extra armor stands and command blocks are needed to remove and add different parts to the Bonnie model, that way everything still looks right even when Bonnie is in these different positions. As for the second half of the system, since Bonnie is now punching me physically, there needs to be the impact of being hit at full force by an animatronic. So I've done this by using a series of command blocks, which is going to teleport me relative to the entrance, where it looks like I'm being knocked to the floor before then picking myself back up. However, since the commands for the door animations are going to keep me locked in a set position, those systems are going to get unpowered to let this new animation play out, where I'm going to get knocked to the floor and the doors are then going to close on their own. So let's go ahead and see this all together now that everything has been fully added. So I now know that Bonnie is over at this camera, so if I go ahead and shine the light while he's there, Bonnie is going to appear right in front of me and knock me to the floor. Now you can see that I've once again used the armor stands to make it seem like I've caught myself on the floor and pushed myself back up to the normal crouching position, before I then get my flashlight back and I'm able to walk around again. And just because I find this really fun, I'll go ahead and do it one more time, so you can see that Bonnie is going to appear and punch me in the face, where somehow I survive the attack and fall to the ground. Now this won't actually be possible during the gameplay itself, as when Bonnie punches you, the flashlight actually gets completely drained, which means I'll have to replace the fuse to be able to shine the light again. But this is now Ignited Bonnie's mechanic all fully completed, so let's go ahead and move on by taking a look at the next Ignited animatronic. Foxy is by far the most active out of the 4 animatronics, but despite that, he still only appears in 12 different positions just like Freddy and Bonnie do. Now it takes at least 5 minutes for him to show up for the first time, however after that, he'll start to return to a random camera about every minute after that. So because there's such a big difference between those 2 time frames, Foxy has 2 different randomizers to determine how long it's going to take for him to show up. And to split up those 2 randomizers, I've set up a dedicated scoreboard to only let the first randomizer's power unless Foxy has already shown up. Now after his first appearance, that scoreboard is going to be set to 1, which is going to stop this first system from powering, and instead is going to let this smaller one power, where now there's only 4 different times where Foxy is able to show up at a camera. So before he becomes active for the first time, it's going to take between 6,000 and 7,000 ticks for him to appear, and after that, it's only going to take between 1,200 and 1,500. And unlike Freddy and Bonnie who hide in the corners of each room, Foxy is going to be standing right in front of the camera for every position he goes to. And what he's doing is moving around to avoid eye contact with the camera every time I look at him, as that's the way to deal with Foxy, where I just need to look at his eyes for a certain amount of time before he goes away. So the next thing to do is to set up a system that's going to detect when I'm doing just that. Now instead of using another armor stand for this, I'm going to be using a silverfish since it has a smaller hitbox, meaning I have to be more accurate instead of just looking at a general area. So every time Foxy moves around, the silverfish is going to follow it and covers up the area where Foxy's eyes are. Then by using the same look detection commands than before, this command block also makes sure that Foxy is currently at one of these positions at camera 1, and is then going to keep increasing the eye timer scoreboard as long as I'm looking at the silverfish. And each camera has its own setup for this, where the next one looks for positions 4 through 6 at the hallway camera, and the last one looks for positions 7 through 9 at camera 3 outside the window. The next part of the system is then what gets Foxy to change position by moving around while also standing in the same camera. However, since I don't want Foxy to just get teleported back to the same position again multiple times in a row, these command blocks are going to change the position scoreboard to be anything but the previous one. So if Foxy was standing at position 1 and the scoreboard matches 20 or higher, a randomizer is then going to set Foxy's position to be either 2 or 3. Now for position 2, it's a little different since it can't roll a number in between 1 and 3, since 2 is already in between those two numbers. So what it's going to do instead is put Foxy back to position 1 again by subtracting 1 from the position scoreboard. Finally, for number 3, this can work in the exact same way as position 1, as it's either going to select a position between 1 or 2. Now the exact same thing goes for the other camera positions, where it just makes sure that Foxy doesn't move to the same place after I've looked at his eye for the required amount of time. So to see this for ourselves, whenever I look at Foxy's eye for a few seconds, he's then going to move to a different position to try and break eye contact. And this is going to keep on happening over and over again until he eventually leaves after I've caught him enough times. Speaking of which, the amount of times I need to look at Foxy actually increases as the night goes on. For the first time he shows up, Foxy needs to be caught 3 times before he eventually leaves. Now after that, it continues to go up after every appearance, where it then takes 4 times to catch Foxy, and then 5 times after that, and then 6 times, before it finally reaches 7, which is when it's then going to continue that cycle for the rest of the game. It took a lot of different numbers to set this up correctly, as this system not only keeps track of what stage Foxy is at, but also how many times I've looked at him in total. So at first Foxy is going to start out at stage 1, and once I look at him 3 times, it's then going to activate this scoreboard to make Foxy leave and restart his timer. Now this is then going to move Foxy up to stage 2 since I've now looked at him 3 times during his first appearance, meaning I'm going to need to look at Foxy more often. So now that I need to look at him 4 times to make him leave, the next command block is only going to power once I've caught him a total of 7 different times. And since that's now another stage done, this is then going to set the stage to level 3, where now Foxy needs to be looked at 5 times, and this just keeps on going up until it reaches stage 5, where Foxy has been caught 25 different times. Now this is when the increase is going to stop, and Foxy needs to be caught 7 times each for the remainder of the night. So once it hits stage 5 and I catch Foxy 25 times altogether, the scoreboard that totals the amount of times I've caught Foxy is then going to reset, making it so that this single system here is going to cycle on and on until I either beat the night or get killed by an animatronic. To show this off, instead of now cycling through the same 3 positions over and over, Foxy is now going to disappear once I've looked at him 3 times. And since that's now stage 1 finished, when I bring him back for round 2, it's now going to take 4 attempts to make Foxy leave, and so on and so forth throughout the night. Now with that being said though, I'm going to leave this example at that, as I'm pretty sure we're going to be seeing a lot more of Foxy during the gameplay, with the stages being set to even higher levels than they are right now. Now while all of that is going on, if at any point I decide to walk up to the door that Foxy is currently at, he's going to stop moving around and will instead be right in front of me. And that's because by doing this, I've activated Foxy's first jump scare scenario. Now like usual, I've gone ahead and done all of this by myself, as you might notice the amount of animation commands here compared to Freddy and Bonnie's. So the jump scare for Foxy has a lot more movements to it as he jumps out from the doorway, meaning all of the armor stands around him need to be constantly teleported around him at all time. So now if I go ahead and open up the door again while Foxy is standing there and shine the light, we're now going to see the entire jump scare play out before the game is then going to end. And now after a few more hours, I've now set up the exact same animation to play from different angles at the hallway and the window. So since each of these are facing in different directions, all of the teleport commands needed to be reworked, that way everything still looks right from the different angle. So let's go ahead and see this again, but this time from the hallway perspective, as Foxy is currently standing behind this door, and using the light will cause the hallway jump scare sequence to play out instead. Now earlier on, I know that I said Freddy's jump scare was my favorite that I've ever made, however I already think that I've changed my mind about it, as I really like how Foxy's jump scare turned out. However, I also mentioned that this is only Foxy's first jump scare scenario, as there is another way that Foxy is able to enter the office, and that's by simply ignoring him on the camera. So once Foxy shows up, there is exactly 50 seconds to deal with him before he charges in himself. Now getting a 50-second countdown to work is nothing special, but getting Foxy to run at me and jump scare me is a bit more involved. So just like with Freddy, once Foxy's second timer reaches 0, a zombie is going to teleport inside of the office, which is then going to take control over the Foxy model and start chasing after me. However, there's going to be a lot more to this than before, as since the power isn't out this time, a lot more needs to happen to make sure the jump scare is going to work the way it should. For example, both scoreboards to make me leave the cameras and the fuse box is going to be set to 1, just to make sure that I'm somewhere in the office for Foxy to find me. Then depending where I was is going to change where Foxy is going to spawn, as if I was looking at the cameras or standing around the desk, Foxy is going to start at the hallway that leads to the power room. Now if I was at the fuse box or anywhere else, Foxy is going to break through the closet door and goes around the corner to get me. Now during this chase sequence, Foxy is also going to have his own quick animation play where the model's legs are moving to make it look like he's actually running around. And this animation cycle is all inside of these command blocks right here, where a certain animation frame is going to play out when a scoreboard matches a certain number. And this is all what finally leads up to the jump scare itself once Foxy gets close enough. So to see this all together, I'll go ahead and set his timer to 0, where we can see that he's entered the room and is going to instantly start chasing after me. Now though the jump scare itself is a lot quicker than the previous one, I think it's still just as effective. Now let's go ahead and do it one more time, but this time while setting at the cameras, where you can see I've been kicked from it and put back inside the office, so that way Foxy is able to reach me and end the game. Now all of the other systems are also going to get disabled at the same time, so I don't have to worry about being in a place where Foxy isn't able to get me. To put it simply, once Foxy enters the office, there's no escaping from him. So now that everything to do with Foxy has been fully added, it's now time to move on to the fourth and final animatronic encounter during the night, with that of course being Ignited Chica. Unlike everyone else, Chica doesn't actually appear in one of the cameras and will instead immediately show up inside of the office while hanging upside down from the ceiling. Now the first time this sequence can happen is around the 9-minute mark, which makes Chica the last animatronic to become active by far. Before that though, a quick sequence is going to happen where the ceiling of the office is going to get covered in mold and creates the way for Chica to show up at. So exactly 7 seconds before she shows up, these 8 command blocks here are going to clone one of these frames up into the build to make it look like the mold is spreading. Now at the same time, a sound cue is going to play to make me aware that Chica is about to become active, before the timer then reaches 0, which is when Chica is finally going to show up inside the office. Now instead of having an entire sequence of command blocks slowly teleporting the model through the ceiling, a single command block is slowly going to move the entire thing downward until it reaches a certain coordinate and is then going to stop moving. And now that Chica has shown up, another command block is rotating the model to face towards me at all times, that way Chica is always going to be looking at me. So at these set coordinates, unless Chica is standing within 0.1 blocks away from it, the rest of the command block is going to keep on moving Chica downward through the ceiling by teleporting her relative to her current Y coordinate. This is when the main gameplay mechanic is going to start, as now that Chica has become active, a random amount of cupcakes are going to spawn inside of the cabinets, and all of them have to be found within a certain amount of time to prevent Chica's jump scare from happening. Now the system for this is very similar to the one that hides the fuses, however this one has a few extra steps to it since there's more than one cupcake active at one given time. So when this randomizer here rolls a number between 1 and 8, one of these command blocks is going to power and is then going to put a cupcake inside of the corresponding cabinet. And just like the fuses, I've done this by once again having an invisible armor stand holding the item in its hand. Where things start to get different though is at the start of each of these command blocks here, where the first thing it's going to do is check to see what stage the cupcakes are set to, which is how many times Chica has shown up, and then it's going to see how many cupcakes have spawned so far in the current round. And this is the most important part, as for stage 1, only 3 cupcakes are going to be hiding around the office, so if that score is set to 3 or higher, I don't want another one to be hiding on top of that as well. So after all of that, it's then going to roll the randomizer again, so that way another chain of command blocks can hide another cupcake somewhere else, and then it's going to set this scoreboard to 1, which is going to tell a later randomizer that there's already a cupcake hiding inside of cabinet 1. Finally, to let the first commands know how many cupcakes have spawned so far in the current round, the scoreboard counter is going to increase until it reaches the limit for the current stage. Now, because the randomizer has a chance of landing on the same cabinet once it rolls again, this next system here is going to check to see if that cabinet has already been taken and if the randomizer rolls on the same number again. If it does, it's then going to re-roll the randomizer so that way another system can power and hide the cupcake somewhere else. And that's because there's a scoreboard that locks the command once the cabinet has been taken, that way the original command block isn't going to power a second time over. So with that first part fully added, when Chica appears through the ceiling for the first time, 3 cupcakes are going to spawn in 3 random cabinets, and now I can look through each one to try and find them. Now at the moment, once they do show up, they're just going to stay in there forever, so next let's go ahead and take a look at how to make them go away by shining the light on them. This works in a similar way to catching Foxy in the cameras, where a scoreboard is going to keep on increasing whenever I'm doing a certain action. This time though, the requirements are first making sure that I'm actually holding the flashlight in my hand, which is what this first execute command does, and then it's going to see if I'm standing at the coordinates of a certain cabinet. Then finally it's going to detect if I'm crouching and if the spot for cupcake 1 has been taken, which is finally going to send an output and increase the cupcake timer. So as you can see, when I look at the cupcake now, the scoreboard is going to keep on increasing. However, when I stop crouching, the scoreboard is going to reset, making it so that I have to keep on crouching to scare off the cupcake. And that's exactly what this next system does, which finally gets the cupcakes to leave once the scoreboard matches a number above 5. Now most of these command blocks here are just for sound effects and animation, but on top of that, a single charge is going to get removed from the flashlight, while also adding a small amount of light in front of the cabinet. And the animation itself is a lot more simple than any other ones, as it's just simply rotating the arm of the armor stand to make it look like the cupcake is shaking. So now if I look inside of the cabinet again while something is there, the cupcake is going to scream before it starts shaking, and is then going to disappear with some black particles to go along with it. And once I've found all 3 of them, Chica is then going to disappear along with them, and then the randomizer is going to start over again for the next time Chica is going to show up. Instead of that taking another 10 minutes though, one of these 4 new randomizers is going to power, which is going to make Chica return within a much shorter time frame. And when she does show up again, the cupcake stage is going to increase, which is then going to up the amount of cupcakes that spawn by 1 until Chica appears 5 times, and then 5 cupcakes are going to keep on spawning for the rest of the game. So now with the cupcakes mechanic all completed, let's now go ahead and take a look at Chica herself. Now to start, I've gone ahead and added in a small animation cycle to play, so that way it looks like Chica is struggling to get out of the ceiling instead of just standing completely still. All of these animation command blocks are going to start playing the moment her attack starts, and are going to keep on playing for 1 minute and 20 seconds, which is how long I have to scare off the cupcakes before Chica herself is going to start chasing after me. And once again, to do this, I've set up a zombie to act as Chica's pathfinding, except this time it works a bit differently since Chica actually stays hanging from the ceiling even after the timer runs out. So instead of having the model cover over the zombie itself, the model is going to teleport on top of the zombie, so that way Chica is still on the ceiling but is able to move around like normal since the zombie is standing on the floor. So the idea to make this work might be a bit silly, but sometimes that's what it takes to get things like this to work. This sequence is what finally leads up to the jump scare itself for when the zombie catches me, which is by far the smallest animation out of the 4 jump scares. However, it does have a really cool feature to it where Chica is going to grab the player and drags them up into the ceiling. So along with teleporting in front of the animatronic like any other jump scare, this one also has a second teleport command that moves Chica back up into the ceiling for a few seconds before the game is going to end. So once the timer ends, we'll be able to see this for ourselves, where Chica is going to charge towards me before the jump scare itself is going to play out. And though it's not completely noticeable, you can see how it was slowly being dragged upward for a few seconds during the last half of the jump scare. And finally, the same thing is going to happen even if I walk up to Chica while she's still hanging from the ceiling. So instead of having the zombie spawn in once her timer ends, the zombie is always going to be underneath Chica during the entire time she's active, and getting too close to it is also going to trigger the jump scare. With that though, not only have Chica's mechanics been completed, but all 4 ignited animatronics have now been fully added and are ready to become active during the gameplay. Now the total command block count went from 737 before I started working on Freddy, to now just over 4,200, however I think that everything has turned out really well and I'm looking forward to seeing them all active at the same time. With that being said though, I'm still not quite done with this project just yet, as even though the main mechanics and animatronics have been added, there's still plenty of smaller details and features that you wouldn't normally think are needed, but are going to add some extra polish to the build to make it stand out even more. So without any more further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the last pieces needed to complete this project. At this point, it's been around 2 months since I started on this build, which means it's been a while since I've worked on some of the gameplay mechanics. So before I add anything else to the build, I want to go back and take a look at the camera system, as there's an important feature that I never added that I want to get out of the way first. And that feature is the battery display to show off when the camera fuse is going to go out without having to go over to the fuse box itself. So what I've done to start is made 3 separate boss bars for each camera, as I think that having an actual meter on the screen is going to make this look more realistic. So for example, if the cameras are currently being used and I'm standing at the coordinates for camera 1, boss bar 1 is then going to be displayed at the top of the screen. Now if at any point I leave those set coordinates, this second command block is going to power, which is then going to set that same boss bar to be invisible. That way if I switch to a different camera, the next boss bar can be visible, or none at all if I exit the cameras completely. And here you can see what that's going to look like, where I have a named boss bar at the top of the screen, which is going to label the camera that I'm currently looking at. Now if I go ahead and switch to a different camera, the name is also going to change with it. However, depending how long I've looked at a camera is going to change how full the boss bar itself is going to be. So all that's left to do is to make that meter go down the more I use the camera, which only took a total of 4 command blocks for each camera system to work. So by using the same fuse timer scoreboard for that specific camera, the boss bar is going to get set to a certain value when the score is in between a certain range of numbers. So at 1050 to 1400 ticks, the boss bar is going to be set to 100% charge, but since there are 4 notches on the battery meter, the boss bar is going to update every 350 ticks after that, which is going to remove 25% from the meter every time. So while this might not be the most exciting thing that I've added so far, this is still going to help out a lot during the gameplay by letting me know when I need to change the fuse for that specific camera. And this is pretty much how the rest of the features are going to be like, where instead of having a single mechanic that's made up of hundreds of command blocks, it's instead going to be a lot of smaller systems just like this one, which are only going to need a handful of command blocks to work. With that being said though, the next thing I want to do will probably use a lot more command blocks, as I next want to limit my inventory and make it so that I can't even use it at all. Right now there's a lot of problems with it, as I can just take any item I want and do whatever I want with it, which would not only let me hold multiple fuses at the same time, which would be a massive exploit, but it would also be a problem if I were to just throw these items from my inventory, as now I no longer have the items needed to even play the game. So starting with the easy part, if I haven't found the fuse yet, this command block is going to keep on replacing the item slot in my offhand with air, that way I'm not able to hold any other item in my offhand. Now if I have found the fuse, I still don't want to be able to swap it out with the flashlight, so this command block will keep on replacing that item slot with the item from inside of this chest if I no longer have the fuse in my offhand. And the same thing also goes with the flashlight, where if that item is no longer in my first inventory slot, the item is instantly going to be replaced with a new one. However, since I don't want this to happen if the power is out or if I'm using the cameras, this command block is only going to power unless these 2 scoreboards here have been set to 1. So if I go ahead and press F, which would normally swap those 2 items, it's no longer going to do so while these 2 command blocks are active. And even if I try to do it myself manually through the inventory, you can see that both items are instantly being replaced and are being put back where they should be. Now this works for the first hotbar slot, but now I need it to work for all 36 and for both items. So this is where the command block count starts to go up quite a bit, as even though all of these do the exact same thing, each one is connected to a different inventory slot. So the command blocks start by first making sure that the game is currently in play by using this scoreboard here, and then it's going to power unless the item in that inventory slot is set to air, which otherwise means there's nothing in that item slot at all. Now if that's the case, it's then going to replace that item slot back to air, which just removes any extra items from the inventory. So now if I try to move the flashlight or the fuse to any other item slot, you can see that the item is instantly being removed, so that way I can't hold multiple versions of the same item. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, this is my first time properly recreating a game with free roam, so I really want to make sure that I'm only able to hold the items that I need without there being any exploits. But to now finish this up, the last restriction I've added is actually to my movement, as I thought that the normal walking speed made it too quick and easy to run around the office. So what I've done is changed my movement speed to be slightly slower, while also adding a reverse jump boost effect, which is going to stop me from being able to jump on top of blocks. It's not that big of a change, but I think it's needed for a game like this to work as it should. Next I want to go back and take a look at the office build itself, as even though the build is finished, there's still a few sequences and events that can happen throughout the night. And the one I want to take a look at first are the random Chica encounters, where she can randomly appear at 4 places around the office. These can either be the right wall behind the monitor, the left wall that leads to the power room, the doorway to the power room itself, and finally at the end of the hallway that leads back to the office. And the good thing about this is that Chica doesn't actually do anything other than just appear and disappear once I look at her, so I don't have to worry about adding an entire new gameplay mechanic again just to deal with her. However, since this is separate from her main mechanic later on, I've made a second model of Chica just for these random events, where this model is going to be the one to teleport to those 4 random positions. Now even though these are random events, Chica is still only going to show up if a certain action is done, with those either being exiting the cameras or closing the fuse box. So for possibly the last time in this video, every time I open up the cameras, a randomizer is going to power and is going to roll a number between 1 and 50. Now if it lands on 50, it's then going to activate this command block chain, and is then going to teleport Chica to the left side of the office. However, there is still another requirement for this to happen, and that's if I'm looking at the left camera monitor when the scoreboard itself matches 50. And that's because Chica can only appear at the same side of the office as the last monitor that I was looking at. So for example, if I was using the left camera monitor, Chica can only appear at the left side of the office, but if I'm looking at the right monitor, Chica is going to appear at the right side. So the same command that makes the left monitor work is also going to work for the right one, where once I exit camera 3, there's a chance that Chica is going to appear at the right side of the office. Now since there's a low chance of this happening, I'm just going to set the score to 50 myself, where now you can see when I exit the camera, Chica is now standing at the left wall of the office. Now if I go ahead and do the same thing for camera 3, you can see that when I exit the cameras again, Chica is now standing at the right wall behind the monitor. But now moving over to the power room encounters, the teleport commands work in the exact same way, but the way to get there is a little different. So whenever I enter the fuse box room, this command block here is going to detect it, and is then going to power the same randomizer command than before, but this time it's going to look for a number between 1 and 100. And this is because Chica has a 50-50 chance of being either at the doorway if it rolls a 50, or the hallway if it lands on 100. So there's still a 50-50 chance that Chica can show up at one of these 2 positions, but I was still able to make this work by using the same randomizer command than before. So to show this off, whenever I use the fuse box, the randomizer has a chance of rolling a higher number than the cameras can. However, even if the randomizer rolls on a 50, Chica is then going to show up right behind me. Now if the randomizer rolls a 100, Chica is then going to teleport at the end of the hallway that leads back to the office. Now even though the randomizer is rolling higher numbers than the cameras, it's still not going to mess around with the camera system, as these commands are only going to power if I was standing at the coordinates for the camera system to work. And the same thing works the other way around for the fuse box, where if I'm looking at the cameras and the score matches 50, Chica isn't going to teleport to the fuse box room since I'm not standing at the coordinates for the fuse box randomizer to work. So with the randomizers now out of the way, the last thing that's needed is the system to make Chica leave once I look at her. Now for the camera system, this is pretty simple, as all it's doing is looking to see if Chica is standing at one of the 2 corners when I exit the cameras and if the scoreboard matches 50. Now if all of this is true, it's then going to send an output, and is then going to power this quick animation that's going to move Chica behind the wall again before she teleports out of the office. So now we can go ahead and see what this is going to look like with the system fully finished. So if I go ahead and set the score to 50 and then exit the camera, Chica is going to show up for a brief second before then hiding behind the wall again. And the same thing works for the other monitor, where if the score matches 50, Chica is going to show up for a brief moment before then hiding behind the wall. Finally, for the two fuse box encounters, I had to change the activation commands a bit, as if I were to just exit the fuse box and the system powers, there's a high chance that Chica is going to hide behind the wall before I even get a chance to look at her. So what these last two command blocks are going to do is check to see if I'm looking at the Chica model in the same way that I've used armor stands as detection entities in other parts of this build. So this is just going to make sure that I'm actually able to see Chica right before she leaves, as instead of having 3 animation frames like the other 2 animations do, these two only have 1 animation frame, so that way Chica is able to hide behind the wall a lot faster, so that way I'm not able to see her teleport out of the build. So once again, if the score matches the number needed when I exit the fuse box, Chica is then going to show up right behind me and then hides behind the wall once I look at her. And then for the fourth and final encounter is for when Chica shows up at the hallway, so once I exit the fuse box and walk up to this door, Chica is then going to quickly hide behind the wall before getting teleported out of the build. So with that, these events now have a random chance of happening until the main Chica mechanic becomes active, meaning for the first 9 minutes of the night, I'll be able to see this happen by either looking at the monitors or using the fuse box. Speaking of which, the next thing I want to work on also uses the fuse box, but in a much more direct way, which will be a lot easier to notice. As the night goes on, the office and the surrounding areas will start to become more haunted, where the walls will start to form cracks, while other random objects will start appearing around the room. And this is directly related to the amount of times that the main power fuse is replaced inside the fuse box, where the more it's swapped out, the worse state the office is going to get. So because this involves changing the blocks of the build itself, the best way to do this is by having multiple presets for each office stage and cloning parts of each one up into the play area. So obviously the first preset is for the office in its default state, but each one after that slowly turns the office to become more withered until almost every single block is changed to give the room a rundown look. Now because there's already a lot of important gameplay blocks like the doors and the cabinets which are in the office by default, I can't just copy over an entire preset all at the same time, as that would mess around with those mechanics. So the reason why there's so many command blocks here is because each clone command is only copying over a section of each wall at a time, that way it doesn't break any of those important blocks. And because I need to set everything back to normal when the game resets, the first office stage has to copy back all of the layers all at the same time to bring the office back to its original look. So with the first part finished, anytime I replace the main fuse inside the fuse box, this scoreboard is then going to increase, which is then going to power the chain of command blocks to power the clone commands and change the look of the office. And this goes through 4 different stages throughout the night, where progressively more blocks are going to start to get added, which is going to make the office look even worse every time. However, these new blocks aren't the only change that's going to happen, as objects around the room are going to start getting added or even change existing ones, which is just going to change up the build even more. Now at the very start of this video, when I was just building the office, I mentioned that I like to use custom player heads with invisible armor stands to add more detailed decorations to my builds. But now what I've done is taken that idea and gone even further with it than I've ever done before. So you might have already noticed that I've added in a few custom player heads compared to earlier, but this now extends from just being mainly on the desk to now being inside of all of the drawers, so that way there's actually objects inside of them, to even being smaller details while looking at the cameras. And that's exactly how the rest of the office changes are going to work, where as the scoreboard increases, more armor stands are going to have their heads replaced with a custom player head to show off the new details for the current office stage. Now this is simply done by using the item replace command to change the item on an armor stand's head with a certain tag, by using items from inside of a chest when the scoreboard matches a certain number. But what I've also done is given all of these armor stands the same name, that way when the office goes back to stage 1, all of those armor stands are going to have their player heads removed at the same time. With that being said though, this method means there's going to be a lot of armor stands to make up all of the props, as one of the biggest changes to the office are the newspaper clippings that appear all over the walls. So after the main fuse has been replaced for a second time, over 100 newspapers are going to appear along the walls of all 3 rooms. Now, since this is already a lot of entities and are most likely to use even more later on, there isn't going to be a second layer of newspapers, but there's still going to be even more that appear on the floor around the desk. Now, this is definitely the most noticeable change out of any of the office stages, as even though stage 3 doesn't add any withering to the wall, having all of these newspapers show up at the exact same time really stands out a whole lot more. And on top of that, there's still even more details that get added, like this drawing on the cabinet here, as well as a painting that appears in the corner of the office, which is going to change multiple times throughout the night. However, the next feature I want to take a look at is actually on the desk with this alarm clock here. So far this thing has been nothing but decoration, but now I finally want to go ahead and add some function to it. It actually took me quite a while to finally realize how this alarm clock works, as during all of my playthroughs, I noticed that the clock would eventually stop telling the time and would instead rapidly go through random digits. Now at first I thought this was somehow connected to Freddy's mechanic, but I eventually found out that it's just going to start doing this after the main fuse has been replaced 2 times. Now to start, the clock is going to act in the exact same way as the wall clock does, where every time I catch Freddy, the time is going to move forward by an hour. So at first, one of these player heads from inside of the chests are going to replace the clock on the desk, and depending how many times I've caught Freddy is going to determine what time is currently being displayed. Now once the office stage scoreboard gets set to 3 or higher, these repeating command blocks that make this work are then going to stop powering, which is when the glitching effect is then going to start. However, this is only going to affect the minutes display, as the clock is still going to show off the current hour, which means I needed to make a player head for not only all 12 hours, but also a version of each player head to show off a different digit for the minutes as well. Now the idea for this does sound a little complicated, but getting this to work only involves a few command blocks for each hour. So for example with 6 AM, if the office stage scoreboard matches 3 or higher and Freddy has been caught a total of 6 times and the clock timer scoreboard matches a number between 8 or 10, what it's then going to do is replace the original clock item for a different second number from inside of this chest. The other 4 command blocks under it are doing the exact same thing, however each one is only going to power if the timer scoreboard matches a lower number than the one above it. So as this timer keeps on counting down, another player head is quickly going to replace the previous one, that way it looks like it's rapidly changing between the different numbers. And because the time is still set to 6 AM, the first number is going to stay at 6 even if the other numbers are constantly changing. With that though, since all of the other changes pretty much work in the exact same way, I've now gone ahead and finished adding in the rest of them to show it off all together. So at stage 1 the office is just like how it's been the entire time, but once it gets set to stage 2, the withering is going to start appearing at the top layer of the wall, as well as a few newspapers and a box that appear at the front cabinet. Then after that it's stage 3, which is when all of the newspapers appear on the floor and the walls, and it's also when the desk clock is going to start glitching out like how I just went over. Then after that at stage 4, some more wall withering and newspapers show up, but also the floor and the ceiling of the office start to change to slowly show them off becoming run down as well. But then finally at stage 5 is when almost the entire room gets completely covered up, which makes it look completely different from how it started out. But then to reset everything, all I have to do is set the office stage scoreboard back to 1, and then everything goes back to normal again. And that is now another big feature now fully added to the map, which leaves only a few details left to add before everything else has been completely finished. But before I move on to the ending of the game, I quickly want to make one more change to the room, and that's actually to the ceiling fan. I know this sounds completely random and has come out of nowhere, but this thing has been here since the very beginning, and I've kept on looking at it but have never been completely sold with how it looks. However, I think that I've finally come up with a solution to make it better. So originally, the fan blade was just a generic stop motion build, with 2 frames swapping out between each other to make it seem like the fan blades are spinning around. It's a very simple design, and while it can work in some cases, I honestly just don't like the look of it and how much space it took up. So because I like adding extra effort into non-important details, this is what the new fan design looks like, and I think you might see where I'm going with this. Here I have 5 light grey banners on the heads of invisible armor stands, and all of them are surrounding a single armor stand with a polished granite block on the top of its head. Now all of them are standing at the exact same coordinates and are all rotated to face away from each other, that way when they all rotate around at the exact same time, they all move in a way that actually spins the blades around. Now this is probably the most useless thing I've added to this build when compared to everything else, but this honestly looks so much better and unironically might be one of my new favorite parts of it. With that being said though, let's actually move on to something that's a bit more important. And I would say that the ending of the game fits that category, as this is now the last thing that's needed to finally complete all of the gameplay. Now there's actually a lot of steps to the ending, as not only does this include the encounter with Inner Freddy, but also the ending cutscene that plays right after leaving the office itself. So starting with the first of those two, instead of playing the same sequence when I catch Freddy for the 12th time, this new system is going to power, which is eventually going to make up the entire encounter with Inner Freddy. Now to make sure it's actually the right time to power this system, it all starts by first making sure that I've actually caught Freddy a total of 11 times, that way the scoreboard called iFreddyFinal can be set to 1. Now this is then going to stop the original Freddy caught sequence from playing, and is instead going to place a redstone block to power this system once that score matches 1 and I've caught Freddy at one of the entryways. Now even though the sequence is similar to the original one, I still had to make an entire new animation just for this single encounter, since there are some parts of it that are a little different. But if all of the requirements are met to trigger the event, Inner Freddy is then going to replace Ignited Freddy at the doorway, who's then going to laugh at my face before then running away from the office. So Freddy still does turn around and cover his eyes from the flashlight, but the sequence itself lasts a little longer while also having a few more steps to it. Then once the animation plays out, the command system is going to go back to changing game mechanics again, as a new and very important scoreboard is called Object Lock, and this does exactly what you think it does. On top of resetting the power and all of the different camera items, it's also going to put all of the armor stands back in front of each door to stop me from being able to use them, and also teleports all of the zombie prompts out of the build, that way I'm not able to use any of the resources whatsoever. On top of that, the cabinet commands are also going to get blocked, which stops me from being able to find a fuse once the game has ended. Now all of this is just to make sure that I'm not actually able to play the game anymore once it's ended, that way my attention can be drawn to the next sequence, which is when these two doors are going to open up to let me leave the office. And the system for this powers right after the Freddy encounter ends, where it starts by playing a few bell chimes to help indicate that the game has actually ended. Now once the repeaters power this final chain of command blocks here, it's then going to activate this first clone command here, which is then going to force the double doors open to let me walk into the hallway. However, instead of the hallway being the same as it's always been, it's instead going to turn into a pitch black hallway that goes on even further past the wall away from the office. So what I've done is set up these two hallway frames here, where once the game ends, the original one is going to get replaced with this new one, which is actually going to let me walk through it. And as for the rest of the hallway, I've extended the office build by adding this 4x4 walkway here made out of black concrete, which is what I'm going to be walking through to lead up to the ending cutscene. Now speaking of that, I've already gone ahead and added in the full thing already, where I've added in both the visuals and the dialogue between both the creator and the source. And while I would like to show this off now, I think it's best to leave it off until I show off all of the gameplay altogether later on. With that though, that now wraps up all of the gameplay for this entire project. The game itself can now be played with all of the features and mechanics active, and now the game can also finish with an ending. However, there still isn't a proper way to actually start it all. Up until this point, I've either been manually typing in the scoreboards myself, or just using these two buttons to turn the game on and off. But now I think it's finally time to add a proper menu to the game, that way there's a much better way to start it all. For the build of the menu itself, I wanted to get something close to how the actual main menu looks, where the background is almost organic with different shades of red, while a desk and monitor are sitting in the center of the screen. Now the room itself is pretty simple, but I plan on doing a lot with it, which is going to make it much more interesting. Currently I've just set up the title of the map by using a named invisible armor stand, and I've placed it above 3 monitors, where eventually this one is going to let me start the game, and the other 2 are going to be for features that I plan on adding later on. And just like how the monitors in the office work, the way I'm going to be able to select the different options is by having this command block detect when a zombie takes damage. Now once it does, this chain of command blocks here is going to power mostly play sound commands, but one of them is also going to set a redstone block to power this small setup here. So since I don't want the game to just immediately start the moment I hit the button, what I've done is set up a simple but nice animation where I'm going to be slowly teleported towards the monitor almost as if it's pulling me into the screen. Now, to make sure any named armor stands inside of the menu aren't going to be visible after this, the last command block in this chain here is going to set all of the armor stands' names to be invisible, that way their name isn't going to show up during the gameplay. However, there's still a few more things that need to happen after this before the game itself gets started, which includes the opening animation and the monitor death tips if I've been killed by an animatronic. Now, even though the animation itself only lasts for a few seconds, it still took me a few hours to not only recreate it, but also make sure that it looked good in a Minecraft form. So the first thing to look at are these three platforms right here, which are all part of the same system that control my view to make me look in certain directions. So the way this works is by having an armor stand placed in the office and forcing the player to look at it while this command block is powered. So this is going to lock my view to that entity, meaning I can now move the armor stand around, which is then going to move my camera around with it. So to make me look left and right, one of these rows is going to power at a time, which is then going to move the armor stand in a certain direction. Now once this command block is powered, it's then going to unpower the row by removing the redstone block here, before then placing another redstone block at the next row, that way the next command block can move the armor stand in a different direction. And this goes on for quite a bit, as even though I'm only looking left and right, the armor stand needs to move not only fast enough, but also far enough to make it seem like my head is rotating from side to side. Now this is also why none of these numbers here are the same in each command block, as it helps make the movement look less stiff and more lifelike. All of this is just to get my camera to move around, but now I also need the arms of the player to wave around as this is happening at the same time. So the same armor stands used for the arms during the jump scare animations are once again going to be used for this system, where some of these command blocks are going to be changing the rotation values of them to make it seem like the arms are animating in front of the camera. Now this would be all that's needed if I was just looking in a straight direction, but we've just seen that I'm going to be looking all over the place, which means I also need to rotate the armor stands to face in the same direction that I am. So this is where most of the time was spent playing one frame at a time, that way I was making sure that it all aligned where I was looking at. So whenever I've said that animation has taken up the most time compared to anything else in this build, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Even after all of that, however, the game still can't start just yet, as now I need to set up the text that appears on the monitor if I've been jump scared by an animatronic. Now my idea for this relies on a few scoreboards to work, but these first ones for the individual deaths are what's actually going to power the system in the first place if I get killed by a specific character. So depending if one of these scoreboards are set to 1, the last 4 command blocks here are going to set a death timer scoreboard to a certain number, which is how long the death tip for that animatronic is going to play out. However, since these death tips need to play out in a certain order, each command block is only going to power unless the scoreboard for the character under it is set to 1. So for example with Foxy, his scoreboard is only going to get set to 200 unless Freddy and Bonnie have already jump scared me in a previous round. But once one of the timers does start, it's then going to display the tip on the screen with what to do to deal with an animatronic. So for example with Freddy, it's simply do not let the power go out. Now when the timer for a death tip ends, it's then going to power a final chain of command blocks to reset the timer back to 1000, but then it's going to power the same 3 command blocks from earlier for the other 3 animatronics. And this is so that if I've been killed by a different animatronic in a different round, the next death tip can be displayed right after the previous one has ended. And the same thing now goes for the other 3 animatronics, where once their death screen ends, the next one is going to power depending on which one needs to get powered. So this goes on until either all of them have played, but if it's my first time playing the game and I haven't been killed yet, all of this needs to play out a little differently. This is now what the entire system looks like now that everything has been fully added, which now includes all of the death tips as well as the intro dialogue that plays at the start of the game. So if it's my first time playing, instead of powering one of the animatronic death timer commands, the only timer that's going to start is for this row right here, where the source is going to introduce the player to the game that they're playing. Now the next part can either play right after that, or it's going to be the first text to appear, as even if it's not my first time playing the game, I still want the objective of how to win to always be displayed on the screen before the game starts. Now once all of this has finished playing, it's then going to activate the animatronic death timer scoreboards, that way if I've been killed by an animatronic, it can then display the text on the screen if they're needed. However, if I haven't been jump scared and none of the death tips need to play out, it's going to skip over all 4 rows for this last one here, which is when the final dialogue is going to play out and the game itself can finally begin. So if it's my first time playing the game, I'm first going to get the intro dialogue, followed by the objective one, and then the ending one. But if it's any time after that, it's going to start with the objective, before then moving on to any of the animatronics if they're needed, and then the ending one to finish it off. And this is now what finally leads up to the gameplay itself, once the opening animation and the death tips have played out. Now just for convenience sake, what I've decided to do is add a skip option for the death tips. That way if I don't want to go through it every single time I start the game, I can just crouch to skip through it all, and then the game is going to begin just like normal. With that being said, there's still one very final thing left to add, which is actually something I've never done in any of my projects. In the joy of creation, once a jump scare plays out, instead of being sent back to the menu, the game is instead going to start right back over at the opening desk animation, and is going to continue doing this until the game is eventually beaten. So to work around this, I want to add an option to return to the main menu room, while also stopping and resetting the game to prepare for the next time that I'd like to try again. Now obviously I don't want to just have a random button inside the office that does this, and I instead want something that's hidden but still accessible at all time, and that's going to be inside my inventory. I know that I've already set up all of these command blocks here to clear any unneeded items from my inventory, but I've changed it to save a single spot at the top part of my inventory so that way this item can be there during the entire game. Now I have made a few exceptions to this so that way I'm not able to leave the game if I'm looking at the cameras or at a doorway, or especially if a jump scare is happening, so there are going to be a few points where I'm not able to exit. However, if I'm just standing in the office like normal and I put this item on my player head, it's then going to be detected by this command block and is then going to send an output. And as you might expect, the amount of command blocks required to do this is quite a lot. Now luckily getting the animatronics themselves to reset wasn't that difficult, as I've already set up makeshift systems to make this work as I've been testing out each character while making this map. But every timer, scoreboard, or other mechanic needs to be set back to the way it was before the game itself even started, that way when I want to try again everything is going to be ready to go. But now after 3 entire months of working on this build, everything I've wanted to do with this project has now finally been completed. 933 command blocks with 968 repeating command blocks and 4,306 chain command blocks bring this map to a total of 6,207 command blocks that make everything work. On top of that, there are also 118 different scoreboard objectives which span from timers and crouch detectors to debug systems that have helped make building this map a whole lot easier. And now after about a week of playtesting, I've now fixed over 50 different bugs and glitches, which have ranged from just being smaller nitpicks to things that I somehow missed that completely broke the game. For example, one of the bugs I wrote down is quote, "Light battery died, checked Freddy, replaced fuse, Freddy caught sequence played while in the fuse box." That's definitely a bit of a problem that I wouldn't want featured in the final build. And that's because for the first time since my Mega Pizzaplex project, this world will be made available to download for Minecraft version 1.20.4. I've spent the last 2 years building these FNAF maps to help learn and practice my knowledge of command blocks, and with how much effort and polish I put into this project, I think it's finally time to release another project of mine. Not only that, but I've also decided to add in a few extra details that aren't even in the original demo that this is based on. So if you were wondering why I had 3 monitors in the menu if I was just going to have a single option to start the game, that's because there isn't just one option anymore, and there's instead a lot more features to look through and even unlock by playing and beating the game. Now I know it is ironic of me to release a build that isn't my ruined Pizzaplex or Help Wanted 2 since I started on those projects long before this one, but this map is on a much smaller scale despite the time it took to complete, and I wanted to end this year off in the best way that I could. So in the description of this video, I'll have a link to my Planet Minecraft page which will go over the map details and how to install it. Now this is also my first time releasing a map that includes working gameplay like this, but I'm 99% confident in saying that everything will work as intended. And while I'm at it, I'd also like to give a massive thank you to the creator of the Joy of Creation themselves, Nixon, who responded to a clip that I showed off back when the map was still in a really early state. This project has been in the works for quite a long time, and a lot has happened since I started, so seeing support from not only the developer of the game themselves, but also from everyone else was a huge motivator in getting this project finished. It really does mean a lot to me, and I hope that I can continue to create more Minecraft builds just like this in the future. But with all of that being said, it's finally time to see if I can survive a night of the joy of creation in Minecraft. I hope that you enjoy it, and let's see how we do. Alright, so now after 3 months in the making, I can actually go ahead and try this map out and show it off all together. Now, obviously, I have played this a lot. A week of playtesting, and I've been playing this map throughout the time I've been making it, so I'm pretty confident in saying that I can beat this first try. However, who knows, I might end up embarrassing myself and do something silly, but let's get started. So, Creator. I have constructed the scenario just for you. I believe you call this a game. The rules should be familiar to you. To win, find the bear and blind it. Do this until the clock completes a full rotation. I'll be watching over you. Good luck. And though I don't really need it, I feel like I probably will need it a little bit, because now that I'm actually doing this in real time, I feel like I'm going to do something embarrassing, but I'm just going to do exactly what I've done throughout all of my playthroughs, and that is, first of all, find a fuse, and then find a second fuse, so that way I know where they all are. Probably one of the most important parts of this game is knowing where they are, so that way you don't panic, and you know exactly where the next one is. So this one is just right behind me, cool. So, next what I'm going to do is absolutely nothing. Freddy doesn't show up until around 30 to 40 seconds into the night. And even once he does show up instantly, I still have plenty of time to actually find him. So, I've been very consistent with this strategy. And I'm pretty sure this is the only strategy to playing this game, honestly. But checking the camera as pretty much as little as possible has got me to the point where I don't even need to replace a camera fuse. And I've consistently beaten this first try, so... Save the camera battery until Foxy shows up. Although Freddy probably has shown up. Oh, now there he is. And let's catch him. There we go. 1 down, 11 to go. And now I just sit here again. There's a lot of downtime in this game. And that's actually something I really appreciate about it, is that the first time I played this, or I think anyone played it, there was a lot of stress trying to figure out what's going on, because it's a new game. Any game does this, any horror game especially, where there's nothing happening, but it still has you on the edge of your seat because you're expecting something to happen. And now that I've put plenty of hours into not only this game but also the original, it's very surprising how little actually happens. Even later on in the night when the other characters are active, there is a surprising amount of downtime we don't have to worry about too much. Wasting a bit of camera battery there, but I feel I can be a bit more flexible with things. I don't want this to be a... Admittedly, the strategy I use is fairly uninteresting. Not a lot's happening. I could just sit there in front of the desk and do absolutely nothing for about 5 minutes, but I don't think that would be the interesting thing to show off, so I'll go through the cameras occasionally, but 2 a.m. right now. The power will probably go out soon. Freddy will either show up before the next one or it'll go off around now. And that's what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to wait until the lights start flickering until I change the main power. Now. Because what it lets me do is have a loose idea of when Freddy is about to appear and when the power needs changing. Because they don't happen around the same time. But I have been very consistent with getting Freddy 3 times before the power goes out for the first time. So he should have reappeared. There he is. Get a general idea of when things are going to happen. It's not perfect just yet, but at this point it's probably just pure muscle memory. And I can just do things without even needing to think about it too much at this point. So next fuse is right behind me. I just need to keep that in mind because as I keep talking, I'm probably going to forget that fuse is there. So I'm going to go around the office a few times just to make sure that I haven't missed anything. Because these fuses are pretty important. Don't want to use too much power, but I also want to make sure that I don't do that. That was close. So Bonnie is there at camera 3. Alright, so I don't need to worry about that camera too much. I can do whatever I want in these 2 cameras, but As long as I am careful on camera 3, I shouldn't need to worry about anything. And also, if Freddy is in that corner, I don't need to worry about Bonnie either, if I shine the light in the right direction. If I don't, then Bonnie is going to break the camera, and then I might have a little bit of an issue, but shouldn't be too bad. Nothing I can't handle at this point. Where are we at on the flashlight battery, though? I've used it, what was that, 4 times? Yeah, I'm fine for the time being. I don't want to waste things. I probably will go back to the fuse box occasionally, just because, like I've mentioned a few times, there is so much downtime here, but I just like seeing how things are going and know what to expect going into this, regardless how many times I've played this or not, but it's still fun. I still really enjoy the gameplay loop of this. It is probably, though very expected and generic, probably one of my favorite fan games still. The original, and just this one already. The gameplay is really fun. That's honestly the most important part of any game, is obviously the gameplay. And this game has a very good gameplay loop. It's fair in a very strict way, where there is little room to mess up, but it's not the end of the run if you do. But if you mess up too much, it's, yeah, definitely not going to end well. But it's really fun. It's rewarding. I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. So we're at 5. We're almost halfway through. I'm expecting Freddy to show up at least... Never mind. I was going to say hopefully one more time, but... I'm guessing I caught Freddy too late one of those times, and that just threw me out of the loop completely. And here are all the armor stands. All of the newspapers showing up at once. The fuse was over there. And I'm going to go back and find another one, wherever that might be, right behind me again. Cool. Hello. Was just about to start thinking about you, actually. I guess it is around that time for Foxy to show up. So I'm going to need to use these a little more often. Hello, Freddy. Let's get rid of you. Right. So Foxy has appeared now. Chica is going to appear in a few minutes' time. I shouldn't need to worry about the flashlight battery, but I think I'm already low on it anyway. What was that, 5 or 6? Yeah, I'll just do it now. I've got the time to. Again, I'd rather be safe than sorry, so I lose nothing by it. If anything, it lets me find another fuse somewhere. Over here. And find the next one, wherever that might be. Foxy isn't going to show up, but we're going to be checking the cameras a whole lot more often now. Even if I'm not going through it to try and find Freddy, Foxy is now the priority. Even if I'm not looking everywhere, Foxy has priority over everyone else, then Chica if she's active. Freddy, you can wait for as long as you want. There is no time requirement to shine the light on Freddy. That's why some runs of this game last 40 minutes and some last 12 minutes. I think that was my quickest time. I managed to get this game done in around 12 minutes, which sounds like a long time, and in fairness, it's definitely the longest night in any FNAF game I've recreated. Get rid of you, Foxy. I think the second longest, or the last time there was a long night, was Candy's 2, which was 7 minutes for a night. This is around double that. And again, the Minecraft recreation might be a little different, but I'm pretty confident, and all of the timers are pretty much the exact same as everyone in the original game. So, again, if you've played one, you're pretty much going to get the idea of the other. Let's go ahead and find this other fuse. I think it was back here, actually. Let's go on. It sure was. Anything else? Nope. So it's going to be back here. Chica will show up soon. Eventually, at some point. And I'm braced for that. Because that's when I actually need to care about the flashlight battery. Right now, I haven't been too much, because it hasn't really been a priority. I can shine the light on Freddy whenever I want, and change the battery whenever I want. But now, my focus needs to shift. Foxy is more important, so I'm going to be checking the cameras more. If Chica shows up, I need to get the cupcakes. Not immediately, but pretty quickly still. Foxy's not active. Freddy's not going to be there. I don't need to care about Bonnie at all. If he's in the camera, it's good for him. I don't need to check. We're already at 8, though. Doing pretty well. I don't expect anything bad to happen, but, you know, you never know with these games. I guess there is a small pot of luck when it comes to these, or just any game in general, I suppose. Hello, you. You know, something I've thought about, and I've kind of been wanting to bring this up for a while now. Foxy's mechanic in this game reminds me a lot of Five Nights at Candy's 3. I know I just talked about Candy's 2, but the Monster Rat and Monster Vinny, Foxy jumping around the cameras like that. I don't know if there's inspiration behind it, but him just trying to avoid eye contact from the camera reminds me a lot of the mechanic from Candy's 3. And I don't know if that's intentional, or if it's just because it's a fun gameplay mechanic. Speaking of fun gameplay mechanics, here comes Chica. And here we go. Alright, find these cupcakes, and I hope I have the flashlight battery for it. There we go. There's one. Should be good. I didn't check though. Who knows? Last one, of course, it would be. There we go, cool. I definitely need to change it now though. And this is where the gameplay loop seems like it's going to be more chaotic, but it's honestly not too bad to handle. Also, now that Chica showed up, I don't have to worry about having any of the random encounters show up, which I guess is a bit of a shame. It would have been cool to see Chica show up at the hallway or whatnot, but not now, I guess. I'll have to wait till later. Or another game. I'll show it off later with all the jump scares anyway, and I've already shown off everything practically throughout this video, but it's still been fun to show off. Right, let's find that other fuse. Actually, I'm going to check Foxy quickly, just because it's been a minute. Where is he at? There he is. Hello, you. How many times is it now? 5, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I've not really been counting track of that. Not that it's important. Go ahead and shine light on Freddy. Probably nearly done, actually. Yeah, we're at 9. Cool. Nearly there. That's not good. Where is this fuse? Maybe start a little bit of panicking. There it is. I mean, I was kind of expecting it. I did see it was at 3 bars last time. We're fine. And I'm good on camera 3. Camera 3 will be next, probably, but, again, if I don't use the cameras that often, I should be good to go. Alrighty, Chica. That was a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. Fox is not there, so I don't need to worry about him. Easy. One. They're all going to be on the other side, then. That's 1, 2. That's the next fuse. 3. And 4. That's something as well. You notice I didn't go immediately to find another fuse. That's because once Chica's active, she kind of gives you the time to look for the other fuse when you have to look for all the cupcakes. So you don't need to waste time going around the office occasionally. Chica kind of lets you do that. Hello, Freddy. Foxy. Wrong one. 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, hello, Freddy as well, actually, I guess. Alright, cool. They're both there. That's easy to remember. Alright. Freddy. Cool. Where are we at? 10? 9, 10? 10. Cool. Don't need to worry about anyone else. Let's go ahead and check the fuse box. Just maybe last time. Maybe I'll reset the power now, actually. Never mind. Maybe. Just so I don't have to again. I feel like I might be able to beat the rest of this without changing the power or doing anything else, but rather be safe than sorry. But he's not going to be here now. Honestly, I might... Hello. I might just wait for another Foxy encounter. That way I know how long it's going to take for him to show up for a 3rd time, or however many times it's been. I don't need to worry about him the next time I find Freddy. So Bonnie was at camera 1. Yeah, no one's there right now. Honestly, Chica might show up again. Kind of expecting that. Yep, there she is. Right on time, actually. Check for Foxy one more time. Nope. Alright. Hopefully Foxy doesn't decide to appear midway through this. 2, 3... He probably will, actually. That's fine, though. And that's it, cool. I'm losing track of how many there are, just check through all of them. Let's see, hello Foxy. 1, 2, that's not good. 3. Hurry up, please. At least once this is done, I'll be able to find Freddy. Oh, I've got the camera battery. Okay. Hopefully Freddy's not at camera 3. Not everything is good, actually. I may have been a bit too flexible. But, hopefully, it's ready. There we go. Yep, that was the last one. Alright, I lost track. All done. Nice. Very, honestly, still fun. Really fun. Even though I've played this many times, it's still really fun to do it every time. But, yeah, very fun, very easy. Well, now that I've have 20 hours in the game, but yeah, that was really fun. Let's go ahead and get the ending. And there we go, to be continued for whenever the full game comes out, and I probably will also be recreating that, because this is still a whole lot of fun to not only build, but also play through. And there we go, thank you for playing Endless Mode Unlocked, Gallery Unlocked. That's a bit of a spoiler, but I also remembered as well, that's the first time I've actually shown off the ending as well, so yeah, nice to see it all finally come together. 3 months in the making, this was a whole lot of fun to do, and I really hope that you enjoyed it, and are also going to have fun playing it as well. Like I said multiple times at the end there, this game is still a whole lot of fun to play through, despite the fact that I was able to beat this with relative ease and in my first attempt. But with that being said, since I did beat this my first try, that means we didn't actually get to see any of the jump scares during the gameplay. So as the last thing for this video, let's go ahead and see all of the jump scares all together during the gameplay. And with that, this massive project has now been completely wrapped up. It's been a long time in the making, but I'm really happy with how everything has turned out. Remember, if you'd like to try out this map for yourself, I've left a link in the video description to the world download so that way you can see everything shown off in this video, as well as a few other things that will let you find out on your own. And if you did enjoy, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, that way you don't miss out on the next time I work on another project just like this one. But with that being said, thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will of course see you in my next video.